Cool. Hey, everybody. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yep.
Sorry I'm late, but I'm here. Got a chat from Hutton. Nice to see you guys. All right. How's everything going today, Tyler?
Not too bad. Just working on a couple designs as usual.
I like your background. How close are you to the Corel buildings for real?
Well, I pass it every day, regardless of which of the locations I go to. So close enough. From where I am right now, it's probably about a half an hour, 40 minutes roughly.
Okay, cool. One of these days we want to get up that way. Just take a tour. It'd be pretty fun.
What's his name there that started Corel? His house is probably another 20 minutes away from where Corel's building is. And he built it using the identical same material as the office building. So it's
really?
and everything in his house is shiny gold.
Mr. Copeland. I don't know if it's Copeland or Cowpland. I don't know how you say it. That's pretty cool. All right. Okay. Good to see you, Analia. We got one more trying to join. She just emailed me, so there's that. All right, I'm gonna find a couple emails here real quick. I think last time we talked about, I was going to show installing fonts, but then we never got to it. So I think I'll start off with that today, because a number of people have asked about how to get fonts installed. So let's do that here. I will start sharing my screen now. Screen share. Hold on just a second. Sharing the wrong one. There we go. Okay, so I will start sharing my screen now. Okay, is everybody able to see my screen? Yeah, okay. So we'll talk a little bit about fonts and then how to install them. When you click on the font tool, or the text tool, I should say, the font drop down is normally listed right here in the middle. And when you click on the down arrow, it's going to tell you how many fonts you have installed there, unless you have it filtered. So if you've got anything in the filter list, let's just say I clicked on Monument Fonts as my filter, then it's going to show how many fonts are in that filtered list and not all of them all together. So I have 135 fonts in my Monument Fonts filter. But if I uncheck that and show all of them that I have on my machine, then there's 2028. Corel actually comes with about 1,000 fonts itself. And so I've got a lot of those installed. If we scroll up a little bit, most of these BT, the ones that end in BT, most of those are coming from Corel. And in order to access those, if you want to get to the fonts from them, they kind of keep changing where things are at. But I think if we go to the welcome screen and go to the store in 2021, In past versions, it was called Get More, or I think they've changed the name a couple of times, but either way, normally from the welcome screen, there's going to be a link to the different things that you have access to. And if you click on fonts over here and then free, then it should pop up, at least it was before, this pack here, this 1000 fonts pack. And so that's the one that I downloaded to use. And if you just click on it, it'll go to this where you just hit download, and then it will automatically download the package and install it into their Corel's fonts folder. So if you want access to those, you can get those there. You can also download other ones. They do have some free, so like the Sphere Sans or Allegria. These are free as well. I believe I've already got these, but just in case, I'll go ahead and go through how you would do it. You click on it and say download. And then once it's downloaded, for this one anyway, you can just hit install and it will install that font pack for you. Most of the time, I like to keep the fonts that I want for monuments separated from everything else. So what I use for doing that is the Corel Font Manager. So if you click on the start bar and go to your Corel Draw graphics suite, and then underneath that, Corel Font Manager will pop up. So that's going to load up on my other screen, and I need to move it over as soon as it's loaded. Cough drop here too. All right, so that's just taking a second to load up. Then I'll bring it over to this screen. Oops. Okay, so here's the Corel Font Manager. Font Manager has what's called collections. And it looks like when I click that install button, it actually installed the Allegria as a collection. So all of those different fonts that come in that are now in that collection. I don't know that I'd want a collection for it per se, so I might just right click and remove that. But before I do, let's take a look at this. Over on the right hand side, you see the yellow mark saying that it's not installed. So it can be used in the Corel Draw product, in the Corel Draw suite, because the font manager is managing that. But it is not going to show up in any other program like Word or Photoshop or whatever other program you might need it or want it to show up in. So if you really want these fonts available outside of the Corel Draw graphics suite, then you would want to right click on it and say install. And that will then put it in the Windows font folder and be available to all your other programs on your machine. So I don't really want that as a collection, so I'm just going to remove the folder or collection and get rid of it that way. I do have my own folders here. Before I was doing collections, but I've actually found that it's a little easier to manage folders as opposed to collection, because with collections, what you would do is you would add a collection, and let's just say my fonts. And then from that collection there, in order to get fonts into it, you have to go to your folders and find the ones that you want, and then you basically drag and drop from here into that collection. And so you can do that. It's not a big deal, but I find it a little easier just to manage actual folders instead of collections. So what I've done is I've just created folders on my end that I then click the add folder button. And when you click the add folder button, then it goes to wherever you have your files saved. So normally if you get a font, it's going to go to downloads. So you grab the font from there and then just throw it into a font folder that it's managing. So I've got this art fonts folder here that's being managed. But if I wanted to have it as its own little collection, I could click just on monument fonts or whichever one of these that I want. So let's say laser etch fonts. If I select that as a folder, then it's going to show me all of the laser etch fonts. And it automatically populates back inside CorelDRAW. So as soon as I go to my text tool and I come over here to my filter list, it's going to show me right here, laser etch fonts. So all I have to do is click on that and it's going to show me the ones that I have that I really like to use for etching. You can download any OpenType or TrueType font that you want to use. The big thing obviously is to make sure that it's sandblastable. And so you want to, make sure it's a nice font that you don't have to do a whole lot of crazy stuff with. And then this is one thing that most people get tripped up on is the sizing. So if we've got, this is MD Roman, my font, and if we go to any other font, let's go to the Allegreo one, which is not going to show up because I'm under laser etching fonts. So here we go, the Allegreo. So that font, you can see, even though we've got 1 inch typed in as the size, it's only 0.661 inches tall. And that's because when it's sizing this, it's including ascenders and descenders in that calculation. And so it's basing the 1 inch off of that height as opposed to the height of just a capital letter like I am doing with my MD Roman font. So we do have a tool to kind of help with that. The Monument Text Docker is to help with that. You just choose a reference letter, choose your size and hit apply, and then it will change so that it's going to be sized better, the way that we size things in monuments. But I know I'm pretty sure we covered that before in a previous session, but I wanted to cover it again just because it comes up so often as to fonts and why do some fonts are smaller than others. And then I also wanted to talk a little bit about the Monument Lettering Center fonts because I use those quite a bit. And I'm going to type this in. Actually, I'll just do a date. I'll do January 2020. So in MD Roman, also going to turn on my on-screen stuff here real quick. I forgot about that. Give me just a second. Here we go. I think it's coming on. Okay, so with MD Roman, I've created the uppercase and the lowercase to be the same characters. And so it doesn't matter if you type in upper or lowercase, it's all going to look the same. And a lot of the MD fonts are that way unless they have a specific lowercase. I've created the upper and lower to be the same. Whereas with the MLC fonts, if I go to MLC Heavy Bar, for instance, then you'll notice a difference between these because everything after the capital J is lowercase. And the reason for that is that they've created the lowercase version as a smaller version of uppercase unless a specific lowercase version exists. And that's so that you can do things like McDonald or, and have upper and lower case ability that way. You can also grab these and, change those to different things like this because they're the lowercase. So all of the MLC fonts are done that way unless there is a specific lowercase, which means that if I were to type this in without holding shift or without using cap locks, the date is going to be smaller than, or sorry, the month is going to be smaller than the numerals, than the dates. And that's because this is not capitalized. So there are two different things that you can do. One is you can choose to, just type in caps. Or the other is, if you didn't type in caps, you can use this AB all capital button. And what that will do is it will change from the small case to all uppercase. And it's just a toggle, so you can go back and forth. So when I'm using the fonts, I usually like to go ahead and type it in sentence case, where it's just the capital J and then everything else is lowercase. And after that, I can decide whether I want it to stay that way or if I want to go all caps or not. I find with dates, I like to have it consistent as far as the height goes, so I'll normally have it all caps, but I've gotten kind of fond of lately having my names upper and lowercase. So I would go like this. Maybe have the E and the N and A lower than the D and the A there. So that gives you the option, but it is something that I notice with people is that sometimes they don't realize that they're not holding shift, or they're not using caps, or they haven't used the all capitals button. And so their text ends up being smaller than it should be. If you were to do like in loving memory in MD Roman in 1 inch, but then you switched over to, actually, let me make sure I do this real quick. Out of habit, I think I actually capitalized, so I'm going to not capitalize loving memory. Okay, so this is not capitalized, but because it's MD Roman, it's always capitalized. But if I were to switch this over to MLC Heavy Bar, all of a sudden you're going to see that it's a smaller font size. It's only 0.9 inches total. And that is because I did not type in caps. So if I really wanted it to be the same size, I would need to capitalize that. So I just wanted to make sure I cover that because it is something that people have asked about or have had trouble with quite a bit. Is capitalizing it. All right. Okay. Any questions on that? No? Good. Okay, I'm gonna go to, I'm gonna kind of switch gears here. Do any of you use Gerber? No? So this might not be too applicable to your workflow. I know I've got a lady on that's trying to get into the meeting that does use Gerber, so hopefully she'll be able to pop in here pretty quick. But I had a client having issues with Gerber the other day, transferring files between Gerber and MemorialDESIGNER. And so I wanted to cover that as well and show what's going on and how to fix that, because it's come up a number of times as well with other people. So I'm going to grab that. Here we go. Okay, so I'll show you first what the design looked like once it came into CorelDRAW, which is pretty awesome. If we look at this design, for one, most of the time, if you don't change settings, designs that are coming in from Gerber are going to be this pink color. But what you'll notice is just how horrible everything looks. And if I go to wireframe, what you'll see is that there are lines everywhere, right? Just extra lines all over the place, connecting all sorts of different things. And the reason for this is because the file to begin with in Gerber had these as open segments, so they were not closed at all. And so when it does the import, or when it tries to, and I'm not sure if it's on Corel's end when it imports or if it's on Gerber's end when it exports, but in one of those filters, it is trying to auto close. And so it's drawing lines everywhere that there is an open line or an open gap. And that's why you can then see all of these different pieces here that are where they shouldn't be. And so it just made a huge mess of these designs. And any attempt that I had in importing the file as a different file type didn't really seem to matter. And so what I did was instead fix the problem in Gerber before sending it to MemorialDESIGNER. And I'm not a Gerber master by any means, but I went ahead and researched it a little bit to see what can be done. And so I'll pull up Gerber here really fast just to show you the steps that I took to get this fixed. Take just a second to pop up here. Then Hutton had asked in the chat, are they marked with MLC or MD? When I go back, we'll go back to these fonts here. My fonts, the MD, all of them start with an MD. Those ones, again, I have basically uppercase is the same as lowercase, unless there's a lowercase version. So like the script and Prime and Optimus, those all have lowercase versions. But if it's block or government or Roman, those, the uppercase and lowercase are the same. It's the ones that are MLC, the Monument Lettering Center fonts. Those are the ones that have a lowercase version that is different from the uppercase version because it's just a smaller, like a small caps version. So it's the MLC ones that usually people are going to get in trouble with just by not realizing that that's the way that they work. I actually like it better because you have the control over whether or not you want it to be capitalized or not, but that's the problem that that you can run into, and that's with the MLC fonts. There we go. All right, it looks like, Holly, it looks like you're in the meeting, so it's good to have you. Hopefully you can hear me. If you want to talk, feel free. If not, you want to mute yourself, that's perfectly fine too. But it looks like you're in the meeting, so that's good. We're talking right now about Gerber import and export between the two, and that sometimes when you go from Gerber into MemorialDESIGNER, you end up getting designs that aren't closed, and it tries to auto close and messes things up. So I've got Gerber here. I'm going to open up this design and show you how it worked in Gerber first, and then we'll go and make it work in MemorialDESIGNER. Okay, so I'm going to save this. And all right, so I will open up the original PLT file that was sent to me. And if I zoom in, sometimes I complain about CorelDRAW's zooming, especially in 2021, because they changed the rendering engine, but compared to other software, it's really not all that bad. Anyway, so in this file, if I click on these pieces, what you'll see is that there are chunks or individual line segments, individual curves, and that's what's making up the design. So it's all sorts of little pieces. And we know that in Corel, we've got the option to auto close, and we've got join and that sort of stuff. to overcome this. But the problem is that somehow, either again with Gerber's filter exporting or the way that Corel imports their exported file, it's trying to auto close and it's just drawing straight line segments to do it. So what I had to do is use Gerber's join tool. And again, like I said, I'm definitely not a very proficient at this, but I selected all of the things that I wanted to close. Zoom in here a little bit. And then went to their join tool, which is, I believe, this one here. And their join tool has a gap tolerance too, similar to how the join Docker has one in CorelDRAW. And I chose to do a join at midpoint. And in order for this distance to show up, I had to uncheck the join always. So then I came over and changed this to like 0.01 and something really small and dragged around it like this. And then I went to a little bit bigger. And I do have tools in CorelDRAW that automatically do this. I'm gonna back up really quick and show the top of this. So you see how these right there are opened up. When I have it on this setting, the join at midpoint, because those are opened, if I try to draw it like this, it's going to connect those together, which is not necessarily what I want. So on this step, instead of joining at the midpoint, I think what I'd want to do is join with a line. And that way it's going to draw a line between those. And so I would just join these with a line. And that was then able to get me to where I could export this file. Because now we can see that these are all connected the way that they ought to be. And so I was able to grab this and export. I'm going to just go ahead and export all. Change this to an AI file and hit export. And then if we go into CorelDRAW and open that up instead, we will see that it is much better. Not all the crazy stuff going on compared to, if we look back at this version, I think it was this one. Yeah. So you can see the difference between those. How much cleaner it comes in that way once it's already closed. So that's how I was able to come up with a solution to get that one fixed. And obviously from here, we're gonna have to fill this in. So I'd grab those pieces, hit fill grayscale. Oh, the other thing too that I had noticed is that I don't know why, but for some reason they had duplicate pieces. So actually I'm going to undo and start back at where we were, grab all that, and I'm going to use the remove duplicates tool. And we've been working on this remove duplicates to make it work a little nicer. And you can see it's got 159 duplicated objects. So that was also a problem. I don't know, I don't really know where the files came from. So I don't know how they ended up getting duplicated, but it's deleted our duplicated objects there. And then it turns blue anything that is still overlapping something else. So because these are overlapping the edge of the stone, that's why it's turned that blue for me, so that I can pay attention to that and realize that that's what's going on. But from there, I should be able to fill that in. I just hit F on the keyboard and I just hit 6 on the keyboard for the outside. And now we've got that filled in there. Sometimes with this design, or designs like this, you want these pieces out here to be frosted, okay? The easiest way to do that is to use the Smart Fill tool. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, just to throw that out there. But what I would normally do is I'd change my black to 10 because that's the frost number. So 0 for all of the others on a CMYK. but 10 on black. And that way I can come in here and click in these different pieces, and it will then fill these in with that frosted 10% gradient. The downside to doing it this way is that now I've got duplicated objects again. So where this line is and that line is, they're going to be duplicated. And I believe I showed this before, but what I would normally do in this case is I would combine all these together, and then under the objects docker, I'm going to rename this as frost line, or delete me or something like that, just to remind me that I need to get rid of that. Because I've done it on this one side, in theory, this should just be the same, so I can hit M to mirror it to the other side. Sometimes theory doesn't always work out, I guess. So I guess their design is not the same on both sides. So we will go ahead and do the same thing. We'll just grab our smart fill and smart fill it there. But I would normally then combine it with this one. And as long as I have this one selected first and then shift select over here, then I can combine them together. And in the objects docker, they're going to maintain that frost delete me name. This might not show up in the video later, so I'm going to pull the docker out just so that you can see how it looks. It's going to have that name there as long as I grab this one last, and that becomes my target for what I'm combining to. So if I grab this one first and then combine it, it's going to keep that name. If I did it backwards, where I grabbed this one first, shift selected this one, and then combined it, it's going to call it curve. That's because whatever you select last becomes your target. So I would want to grab this one and then shift select the frost and combine them that way. I don't know why it's not letting me do it. That way they're the same. I'll put that docker back, but sometimes the video gets in the way of the dockers. So there we go. Maybe if I extend it out a little bit, that'll work better. Okay. Any questions on that? Holly, have you ever run into that? I don't even know if you have a microphone. It says that you're muted now. You weren't muted before, but it says you're muted now.
What about now?
Yep, now you're good. Have you ever run into that problem going from Gerber to MemorialDESIGNER where things kind of come in? This is the way that it came in before, was that it had all these.
It does do some crazy things. Like I had tried a few times from Gerber to this. And so that's kind of why I'm doing this course, because everything that I've been doing so far in the Memorial Design program in the Corel, it's just been to draw images.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah,
so now I'm looking to do the whole thing.
Okay. Hopefully that helps. If you ever run into that, just close the design in Gerber first before you export it out, and that seems to work a lot better. So that is how I would fix that issue there. Okay, so because this design came from somewhere else, okay, it came from Gerber. So all of this text is no longer text. It gets converted to curves when it comes in. This is another thing that people ask quite often is, well, how do I get that text out? Or how do I, change that text, or whatever the case may be. And right now it's all been combined together. So if I move this, you'll see that it's part of that panel. So it is a curve combined with the panel. So if I wanted to replace this text, what I would normally do is I would come in here first, and usually I'll measure, and I like to just use boxes just because it's easy. I'll just take a rectangle and snap it to the top there and drag it to the bottom here. And that will then tell me how big that text is. So 0.75 inches. And I'll do the same thing for line spacing. I'll just go from this point to that point, and it's telling me that it's 3/8 inch line spacing. So I know I've got 3/4 inch text with 3/7/8 spacing. So the next thing that I would normally do is I would just type in the letter It doesn't really matter what I do, but if I just type in 2 letter H's right here, and switch them to Vermarco, so you can do MD Vermarco, or MLC also has a bunch of different Vermarcos, so we can do that and change to 0.75 inches. And then I would normally just bring this down and snap it so that it's snapping to the bottom of that line. You can see that it's not sized yet the way that we want it to. And so I would come over to panels and spacing and change my distribute vertically to 0.375 because that's what it was before. And so then I'll hit apply, and that will then move this line of text up 0.375 away from this one. So now we've got our new text where we want it to be, and so we can get rid of this old stuff. And because it's been combined, I would just grab it on a node level, just grab these nodes and delete them. And I'm just marquee selecting around them, just going around them. And you can do it all at once or in chunks, it doesn't really matter. But I got rid of all that text then that I don't need anymore. So I'm left with the text that I want. I shift select the stone and hit C to center it. And now it's centered where I want it to be. So I can swipe it now and change to in loving memory. I don't even know what I'd change it to, but God, but not forgotten. This is probably too long, but forgotten. Something like that, right? And so I can change this and use my text now, as opposed to before where I was only showing curves, and that didn't work out very well, right? So the same thing for first, last, birth, and death date. Because these are curves, I'm going to come in and just measure. So that's 1.25 inches. This is 1.5 inches. This is 3/8 inch. And this is probably, I'm just going to guess, 1 inch. And it looks like they maintain that 3/8 inch spacing. So we can do the same thing, just type in the new text. And if we want to, we can do the same thing. First name, last name, birth date, death date. You can change your text if you want to after it's all broken apart into separate lines, or you can do it beforehand. I prefer to just break it apart and then change the sizes. So I hit Control K after I type it all in, and then all of these are now separate lines from each other, so they're individual lines. So I can grab all those, and I'll just change it to a condensed version. I do have MD Roman, condensed. I just have to find it like that. So I've got an MD Roman condensed, and I'll just grab this one and go. I can type in 1.25 inches there, or I've got keyboard shortcuts. If I want to go up, I just hit Control and up on the numeric keypad, which is the 8 button, and that will then go up by 1/8 inch increments each time I click that. So now we've got it lined up the way that we want, or sized the way that we want. I usually grab it and hit C to center it, just to make sure it's all centered. And then the size for the spacing is the same. So I'll just hit apply. And then it spaced all of my lines the way that I need them to. So I will take this text and come down here. And what I'm doing is I'm just grabbing it at the bottom of the text, the baseline, and snapping to the bottom of that first line. As long as I snap to that, everything else should fall into place. And if I hold Shift and select the panel, then hit C, it's going to center it on that panel. So it's kind of a mess right now because we've got all of those inside pieces that we need to get rid of. But that's really simple. We can just go to the shape tool, drag a box around all that, hit delete, and now it's all gone. So when you're bringing in designs from other software, most of the time it's going to come in so that your text has been converted to curves. So you end up needing to retype that text, and then you can make your edits from there. So then I can type in whatever I want.
Cameron, would it work the same way if you take a picture of a memorial stone that you want to match the panel on and then make the stone the size, the correct size?
Yep,
Could it
very,
work the
very
same way
similar.
that?
Very similar, other than because you don't have a vector image to begin with, you're not going to need to delete anything. You're just going to be typing over the top of it, right? You're just going to be working over the top of your photo. And that's really, I do the same steps as far as typing in my text. I'll get it all typed in, get it all sized and placed and put where I want it to be. And then, in that case, I would just get rid of the underlying image or move the image to the side so that I don't need it anymore. And then start working off of that, the vector that I've now created. So, but yeah, I mean, it works very similarly, other than you don't have to delete any of the existing stuff because you don't have anything existing. You just have to do that. Yep, absolutely. So now that we've got that all done up and filled, one of the things that I did was I erased the outline. I don't really like hard outlines on my images, and so I tell it to have no outline by right-clicking on this button there. And then I will normally just build a base from scratch if I wanted a base, just using the rectangle tool. Right now I've got lock ratio clicked, so I want to uncheck that so that I can type in a specific value. Otherwise, if I had that still checked, if I went to 36 inches here and this was still locked, if I went to 6 inches this way, it's actually going to make it 51 inches. So you have to pay attention to whether or not your ratios are locked when you're resizing things. But this way I can just build that the size that I want, fill it in with 20%, or you can come up here and tell it to be rock pitch. And now I've got that. I'll usually grab it at the midpoint along the top line. So if I move my cursor to that midpoint, it'll tell me that that's where I'm grabbing at. And when I plop it down to where I want it to go, I will just put it at the midpoint of that piece and snap it. And that way they're going to be where they need to be. Or if I didn't quite put it where I needed to, I can always hit Shift, select this one, and then hit C to center those on each other. Unless you don't want it centered, we can always offset this a little bit and bring in a flower base or something. Normally though, if I'm grabbing and moving things around, I want to grab it at where, a reference point that I want to pull from, and then throw it down to where I want to drop it to. And I find that a lot more useful than just dragging in the middle and trying to lay it somewhere, because it's not going to snap. If I grab it in the middle, it would only snap if I brought it all the way down to the middle. So that's not really what I want to do. So when it comes to snapping, I grab it where I want it to snap from and snap to. That way it snaps easier. Then from there, we can choose our fills and fill it in. Something like that. When it comes time to save the design, because this is coming from another program, it has already converted it to a CorelDRAW file by default because we're inside CorelDRAW now. So it's no longer the PLT file extension that it used to be, or the AI actually, because we had converted it to AI. It's now a CDR file, but it maintains that name because I opened up the existing file. So what I would want to do is I'd want to do a save as, so that I can change this name to something else. And that way, I usually if it's an order that I'm going for, I would type in the order number like this. And then I do my last name and my first name. And this is just kind of file structure. How I like to save things is by order name or order number, last name, comma, first names. And then if I wanted to be able to search for this later, you can add tags. So this has, I believe that is dogwood flowers. If I wanted to type in dogwood, corner emblems, rays, anything like that that I see in the design that I want to be able to search for later. The more you tag it, as far as long as it's accurate taggings, which I'm hoping I'm doing that. As long as the more you tag it, the easier it's going to be to find a design in the future. So I like to tag my designs when I save them so that I can search for them later on. But anyway, so that has brought in a design from Gerber. We've filled it in, we fixed it, and everything. Obviously my names, I haven't typed those in yet, but we're good there. And as long as we've got all of this set up, you can take those and change them then to any font that you want to, and it's going to work out, just fine. So on these ones, if we didn't want this to be in Remarco anymore, maybe we would want to change it to something else, like I don't know, something a little bit fancier maybe. So like formal script maybe. You'll notice on this one, because I had typed in all caps, it's going to be all caps. So that's one reason why a lot of times I will not type in all caps. It's because that way, if I do switch over to a font that has upper and lowercase, I will be able to use that upper and lower as well. And I wouldn't suggest doing formal script at 3/4 of an inch by any means. So if I were to use this font, I'm going to want to make it a lot bigger. But anyway. So all sorts of stuff you can play with and do there. All right, any questions on any of that stuff? No? All right. As far as all the things that I had on my plate today to cover, those were the big ones that people had asked me about. The last one was lettering on an arc. If let's say this in loving memory, instead of being in this panel, we wanted it to be up here. Okay. The question is, how do you get your text to fit to that? And most of the time, if we look at this, there's actually two different paths. There's the stone shape, and then there's the panel, and then there's a whole bunch of other panel shapes too. So if we wanted to, we could fit to the stone shape itself, and that should work. Or if we fit to the panel, we can do that as well. With the text tool selected, if we hover over the line here, you'll notice that the cursor changes from this A icon to, as soon as I get over the top of it, it's going to change to a squiggly line. And then if I go too far in, it's going to change to a dotted rectangle. And it's kind of hard to see on the icon, but that is what it's doing, is it's switching from just the regular text. So if I were to click here, it's going to start artistic text. If I come down here to where the squiggly line is, then it's going to start my text along this path. So I could type in forever loved or something, and it's going to fit to this path, which is the stone shape. If I click on it and drag it around, you'll see how it's dragging around that path. So that's what it's fitting to, is the stone shaped path. And so that should work out pretty well, just because I'm able to fit to that. I can make that a little bit smaller so that it's going to fit. And you can click and drag along that path. You'll notice a red mark pop up if you're centered. So as I drag this, it's going to pop up red, showing me that I'm in the center of that particular segment. And so that's a good place to stop right there. And I can fill it. Oops. I want to grab just the text and fill that in. So this has now been fit to that path so that it's going to bend the same way as that is. Once it's on the path, you can adjust it. So you can come in here and change your spacing and that sort of stuff, just as you would as if it were separated, which is nice. So you can adjust that as well. If we didn't have the stone shape like that, if we wanted to, we could just fit it to the panel. The problem with that is because this panel comes this way and then pops up, it usually is going to get confused as to where that ought to be placed. And so normally in this case, I'm going to grab these nodes and go up to copy and then paste so that I end up with a new version, a new line that I could then fit to instead of that original. And that way it's not going to get confused on this. It's just going to fit to that and not get confused at all. But that's normally what I'd use for doing text on a curve or on an arc is fitting text to path. And if you have the path already and you have the text already, you don't have to click on the path beforehand. You can grab your text and come up to text and say fit text to the path and then point to the path that you want it to fit to. So you can go about it that way as well. All right. Any questions on that one? Okay. So yeah, that's as much as I had planned for the day as far as what I wanted to cover. Do any of you have any questions on anything that you're struggling with, things that you want to see or be able to do that you're currently not able to do? And Analia, just in case you are chatting, I'm going to open up the chat too, just to make sure. Chat, here we go. Where is that chat?
So Cameron, I'm kind of like halfway through the past training sessions.
Okay.
And I did have a question about the Gerber and the AI. Is it the way you import the Gerber is best through AI?
Yeah, so I use the AI file formats going between Gerber and CorelDRAW because to me it seems to be the cleanest.
Both ways, importing and exporting?
I do it both ways, yep.
Okay.
But I also, when I go to Gerber, instead of going up to File and going to Export and then choosing AI as my export, you know, because I can come in here as file type and choose Adobe Illustrator. But the reason that I don't do that is because then you have to choose your, you know, what version you want to go with. And I always go with almost the oldest one, this 3.x one. And then I convert to curves. It should do that anyway because Gerber's not going to be able to read the text since it's got its own proprietary fonts. So I'm going to convert to curves. And then I also need to make sure I would not send this file out because it's got all the granite fills. I want to make sure that it's only line drawings, only, you know, no bitmaps or anything like that. So you can go to File and Export and go through all those settings. Excuse me. But normally I'm just going to hit my AI export button because it's already set for those settings. It's going to send it out as the 3.x. It's going to convert to curves. It's going to put it in the folder. It's going to maintain my file name, all of that stuff. It does automatically. So I use my AI export button to send out, and then I will, when I'm in Gerber and I want to bring it into Memorial Designer, then I just go to export and choose the top option here, AI. And everything else to me doesn't really matter all that much. There are options in here for whether you want to do different colors and that sort of stuff. I have found that it seems to work best to not have any of these things checked. Even these, the cutter shape and all these things, I uncheck all those. And sometimes these are checked by default. So you have to check this one in order to uncheck these. But I find it best to just uncheck all of this stuff altogether. And I think I've been using vinyls only as my options there. And then I just export it and bring it into Corel and fix it from there. But yeah, I use AI both directions. And
Okay, thank you.
for the most case, MonuCAD, I use AI to go into MonuCAD MoneyCAD won't export as an AI file, so I can't go that route. You got DXF export out of MoneyCAD. Cochrane's and Flexi and all those other, it really just depends on what the program is and what it's able to save as to get it into CorelDRAW. But normally I'm going to start with AI first and go from there, just because it seems to be pretty clean and small. So, okay, so Tyler says, I had to resize design 30-37-9 down to 30x30. Had trouble recreating the bottom corner arcs. If it's not going to go too far past noon, can you give it a try live? I will give it a try, Tyler, just to see if I'm any faster. So we're going to open up 3379. And we'll see what this is. Down to 30x30. Okay, so I'm going to assume your stone size is 30x30. And we're going to put this, oops, I'm going to grab this whole thing, put it there, put that to the back. Okay, so you're trying to shrink this down to 30x30 and get it to work. If we notice, if I just grab this and lock my ratio and say 30 inches and go like that, okay, it's going to size it down to 30 inches wide, which is nice. But this top, the bar doesn't quite match up with the SERP that I've created now. And so I really want that to look better. And then if we look at the line thicknesses, if I measure these from here to here, it's 0.078 inches, which isn't too bad. But I usually want it to be pretty consistent, so I would thicken that up myself. So I'm going to ungroup that, combine it together, come in here, and shift select this and run blastable. Let's make sure my blastable setting is set for, let's go 0.09 just because it's already pretty close to 0.08. And then we'll run blastable and see what happens. That's not blastable. I just hit bold object. That was the wrong button to click. We'll give it a second to think. Undo. Okay. Grab that, shift select this, and run blastable. Okay, so that has gone and changed our line thicknesses now so that it is 0.09 instead. But again, I need to fix that bar, right? So there's a couple different things we can do. I think what I would do is I would just grab this section and maybe delete it. And this section over here, well, I don't really need to go that far. I'm just going to grab from here now to here and hit delete. And that's going to delete all those nodes. Because I'm deleting the section first, I can grab the nodes and hit delete and delete those. So I'm going to grab this section, hit delete, and then I'll grab the nodes and delete. And that's going to get rid of all those. Okay. So now I would take this piece and I would do a contour. So I would contour it to the inside and get it to about where I need it to be, right? So something like that. It's gonna run into it pretty close. So I'll contour it like that and then come up and break that contour group apart so that I can get to just these pieces. And I don't need any of this stuff anymore. So I'll delete those nodes. And that leaves me with just these lines here. Okay. So then what I would do normally probably is I'd take this, and I don't know why there's all these other nodes. We'll clean that up a little bit. We don't need that. If I shift select both of these, the join curves, which is this button here, we've got the option to do an extend, and with a gap tolerance, 1 inch looks to be good. It's already given me a blue point there showing me how it's going to close. So I'll just hit apply, and that's going to extend this line that way and that line that way until they meet. And that way it's going to close that in. And I can do the same thing over here. I just want to delete these pieces. I don't need them. Actually, delete that one. I don't need that one. So same thing, just extend. It looks like maybe the gap tolerance is not big enough now because it's not giving me a blue line. So maybe I need to make this a little bit bigger. By making it bigger, it gives me the blue line and shows me that's what it's going to do to close it. So then I'll just hit apply, and that will then close that in for me. So we've got that part, and then we would need to create all the rest of it, right? If I wanted to, I could just measure this, and it's 0.6, is that right? 0.614 inches. So if I changed my settings over here in panels and spacing and did to the inside with a, let's see, double line is what we want. And we're going to do a bar line of was it 6? I forgot already. 0.614. So a bar line of 0.614. And we're going to the inside. And we'll hit apply on this one. Then it's going to build that bar for us. Oh, I wonder what happened there. Oh, I think because it hit here in the middle, it messed up. So I'm going to actually delete these. We don't really need those. And I'll try it again. So we'll do double line to the inside, hit apply. There we go. So now it's going to build my bar all the way across and give us those lines that we want. I guess I should have measured first. Oh, that's my fault. I wasn't looking at my settings. I still have this set to 0.078. I'm going to change that to 0.09 first, and then hit apply, and then it's going to build those lines for us. Okay. So now that it's built those lines, I'm just going to erase the ones that I don't need anymore. So I will break this apart and come in here and delete these sections that I don't need. So I'll get rid of all this stuff. Get rid of all this stuff. I don't know, I think this line already existed, so I don't need that one. And I don't need this one. So I'm really just playing clean up here. Oops, that one I do need. I don't want to, yeah, that one's going to go away. So I don't know, Tyler, on your workflow, how you went about trying to do it or what you would want to do. But from my perspective, this is kind of the way that I'd go about doing it, is just rebuilding these lines and getting rid of the ones that I don't need anymore. Can't remember. Oh, sorry, I'm gonna back up because I got rid of some stuff that I didn't want to. So I was wrong. I did need to keep that because that's the bottom line there. So I did need to keep that one. Oh goodness. Let's just go this route. Don't want that, don't want that. And I could just start over with these and not do that one at all, but we'll try this again. What in the world is it doing? That's funny. Double line. Okay, maybe I won't go about it that way. This is what happens, Tyler, when you ask me to go live. All right, I'm gonna try this again. It's good to have you on, Aaliyah. Thanks for joining us today. Redo. this back to here. Okay. I'm gonna do this a little differently. Instead of using panels, I'm gonna do it a little differently. Because it's actually just this is gonna be the same size, so I'm just gonna hit Control C to copy it, and then Control V to paste it. And that way I can drag this down to here. That's going to then give us that line that we need. I'll do the same thing. Actually, if you do a Control D, you can take your duplicate distance here, and you can actually change this to the 0.614 and this to 0. Actually, this would be a negative 0.614, like that. And I can just duplicate this then down that much, and then I would just do a 0.09, negative 0.09, Control D to duplicate, and now I've got that the way that I want it. So I just need to come in here and trim this up. So virtual segment delete there, and here, and then get rid of that one, get rid of those, get rid of that, get rid of that. And when I'm done virtual segment deleting, hold Shift and drag around it. Oops. I forgot what I did. Doesn't look like that was quite closing up. Oh, because there's this tiny little thing here. That's why I didn't close. So I need to, like that, virtual segment delete that tiny little piece where it's overlapping. Assume the same thing over here. Just delete that and then close it in there. And we could also use back to the join tool. If we had anything that was open, we could use that as well. And I'll just hit F to fill that in. Anyway, that's kind of the steps that I would take. Make it smaller, use Blastable to make it bigger, but then change that that bar to fit the shape of the stone. And it looks like this distance here, which is 0.494, basically half an inch. I would probably want to take the top and align it to the top, and then take my nudge and set it to half an inch, and then just knock that down once. And so that way, this amount of polish all the way around is the same. So that's what I would do. I don't know. Did you do it the same way, Tyler, or was it completely different?
I did a little bit of the same stuff, but I had taken away that big thick bar line and redid that using the panels Docker tool. And then I got it pretty well looking correct, except for at the bottom on each corner, the little swoop that comes out.
Down in here.
Yeah, that was a little bit confusing, but I managed to do it very manually.
Yeah, and that's really probably what I would do if I want this, the frosted portion to hit the edge of the stone, is I would just come in here and grab and add a node and come over and, you know, add 2 nodes actually, and just pull that in, and I'll just turn these into line segments to begin with. But I would likely just manually edit that and move that in, because if you grab it and pull it, if it's a curve, it's going to just curve like that. If it's a straight line and you grabbed it and pulled it, then it's going to move all the rest of this stuff, which you can do, but you would only want to do it if you've got extra nodes here so that it doesn't touch anything on that far end. So if you add nodes on this side first, and this is a straight line segment, then you can pull this and it will go ahead and pull okay. But then I'd normally even come back here and add more nodes like this, and then delete these ones, because that would normally let me curve this a little bit nicer as well. but that's probably what I'd do, is just, yeah, manually add those nodes and change those curves there. Something like that.
Good, thanks.
Yeah, the other option was when I had resized it, I could have resized it so that this portion was along the edge, and then I could just trim it out. So if I, when I did my resize, if I made this just slightly bigger, I guess, so that this portion was the 36 inches or the 30 inches, then it leaves us with this one. And then I could either bring this back, or if you use another object, you can just use another object like this and select this and then just trim it, and it will trim that back. So if you go too far over, that's fine, because you can trim that and it will trim it up. So I could have done it that way as well, but yeah, I would
That probably would be easier, right? So that both sides would be exactly the same.
Yeah, it's probably easier to trim it up rather than going through and manually changing these. Yeah, and like, because we're doing it manually this way, you're right that it's going to, this side is not going to be exactly the same as that other side because I'm doing it manually. So it's not going to be an exact mirror. If we really wanted to, I mean, we could, if we got one side right, you can always combine it all together and then basically take half of it. So I would just take and draw a box that's going to be half of the shape size. So it's 15 inches, right? And then I can trim this up. And now that I've got that one trimmed, I can grab this and mirror it. And now they're going to be the exact same. And then I just have to come in here and weld these, or get rid of these intersections where they've come together like that, and make sure that those are closed. So there's different ways. I mean, there's probably a ton of different ways that you can go about it. Filling with grayscale, hitting the fill grayscale button, you'll notice did not work. It did not turn this inside piece to frost. The reason it did not work is because the frosted part down here is actually touching the black part. So it's not inside that object. It's the same size as that object. And so using frosted grayscale isn't doing what I expect or want it to do. And the reason is because it's the same size. So this inside this one piece here, and actually it looks like it's even, just slightly larger. So it's 30.1 inches. So that's why it's not doing that. So you either have to bring those in so that they are slightly inside that overall shape, or you have to go in and manually combine things. And that's usually what I do. It's just easier to grab everything, deselect that outside piece and hit combine, and then just fill it in myself. So I've just combined all those inside pieces and turned them to that 10% gray. But yeah, I mean, because this is the same on both sides, then it's easy to just work off of one side and mirror, for sure. But no, good question. I hope that was helpful as far as my workflow for doing something crazy like that.
Yeah, that was handy. Thanks.
All right. Okay. Well, I think that gets us to time today. So thanks for joining us, Holly. It's good to have you. I always find that it's way less boring if you ask questions and,
Thank you, Cameron. I feel like I know you guys already because I'm like halfway through all the training videos. I got through all the toolbars.
There you go, right?
Since Thursday, I've been watching a lot of you guys.
I hope you have a lot of popcorn on hand.
Yeah.
But it's good to have you. We'll see you next Tuesday. I will be here, but then I will be gone the following 2 weeks. So in June, we will not have anything the week of the 7th or the 14th, but I will be here next Tuesday. So just to give you a heads up.
And I think the link that I had originally too was not the current link, because every time I was going into the Zoom, It was telling me you were already in a meeting, in a different meeting.
Okay, well, just the one that I just sent you, keep that one on hand. It should work every week. So
Okay.
if you run into troubles, let me know. But
All right.
good to have you.
All right. Thank you.
All right,
I'm
we
glad to
will
be
talk to
here.
you next week.
Okay.
Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.